Previously on the Guild of Gurus. But almost every single format shall try to perhaps make Abyss Dweller to shut off the graveyard effects.
Finally, there are 4 newly forbidden cards in the next advanced format, and they are Abyss Dweller.
In the TCG specifically, Totally Awesome is still illegal, and we would perhaps use Penguin, Special Summon Dolphin, to make Bahamut Shark, and Bahamut Shark can then summon Totally Awesome.
And Bahamut Shark.
Johan, die!
Well, that section of the guide didn't age well. Greetings, Duelists of the Guild. I'm Harmac, the Fluffal Guru, and this is Fluffal Through. The recent TCG ban list has brought about some terrible changes for Fluffal. However, it does come with a positive effect of making the TCG and Master Duel lists more similar. As I record, the Fluffal community is theorising new directions to take Fluffal. Meanwhile, I shall be playing Fluffal through Master Duel, starting with Gold Rank. And during this run I shall be using the Azamina variant, aka Fluffamina. Now, why exactly would we want to use Azamina? That is primarily probably for Sylvia. Now, Sylvia is of course an Omni Negate which we can get rather early on, and it's our replacement for Totally Awesome. Of course, it is not a perfect comparison. Totally Awesome could add a Water Fluffal from graveyard to hand. It could also set a card an opponent used. However, Sylvia does have some advantages, such as it can be recycled after it's already used its Omni Negate, if you draw perhaps a few more Deceptions. And also its surrounding package does boost the consistency of Fluffals. And we can see that starting with Dear Bellstar. Dear Bellstar summons itself from the hand via sending a card from the hand or field, which of course we want to do in Fluffal a lot, and then it will then set one of our Sinful Spoils cards, most likely Deception of the Sinful Spoils. Now with Deception you can tribute a monster from the hand or field. The best value for this would be tributing an Ejump Chain, but and there are some other targets which are fine to choose, such as Ejump Sabers, Shavara, since you can add it back later. But if there are no good targets, you can quite often just tribute the Dear Bellstar that you searched it with. Now of course, once you tribute, you then are going to add the Hallowed Azamina. Now of course, Hallowed Azamina is a very easy to use fusion card. You just send Deceptions to the grave. Now of course we can immediately use Hallowed Azamina to go into Sylvia. However, there's an extra line which you can go through to get a bit more advantage, and that is first using the Hallowed Azamina to summon Mothialago, and then Mothialago can then search for Wanted, and then you can then use the Hallowed Azamina's graveyard effect to send Mothialago back to the extra deck, add Hallowed to the hand, and then you can then use Hallowed again, and this time chain Wanted. And this shall send Wanted to the graveyard, but also summon Sylvia, and you should still get the search for an extra Dear Bellstar. Furthermore, since you have a Deception in the grave and a Wanted in the grave, you can banish Wanted in order to draw an extra card. So that's even more advantage to the Fluffal engine after having already deck thinned so much. Overall, I find that this package provides a bit of consistency to the Master Duel list, which lacks more than one Foolish Burial Goods. And often the threat of Sylvia coming out can just bait out interaction anyway. Other differences that this Master Duel list shall have compared to the TCG now, number 1 is Abyss Dweller. Whilst we still have it in Master Duel, I shall play it. Very powerful. And same goes for Sprite Elf. You can of course use any of the Link 2s or Sheep to make Elf, and then Elf can bring back Sheep. It provides protection, it can bring back like Soul of Rage, and overall it makes this list have a more of a Link 2 focused compared to regular Fluffal lists. And I would say the rest of the deck is pretty standard for Fluffal. Now, onto the games. Now, starting off with game 1, this is somewhere in Gold 5, I believe. I have a nice starting hand, including Dear Bell Star, a few vendors, penguins, and dolphin. It's almost the perfect start. And it being in Gold 5, I don't think it's going to be that much of a challenge. However, then my opponent immediately Perulias me. So I'm now going to have to limit how many times I special summon from the hand, which of course Fluffal Penguin likes to do a lot. And of course the Dear Bellstar also does such. However, I decided to give them at least a draw or so. I'm going to go into my Azamina line here. I also consider, because I don't want to be summoning from the hand so much, I shall perhaps tribute Fluffal Penguin here. However, as soon as I get the fusion spell, they Fualos me as well. So now I'm going to get them to draw cards, whether I summon from the hand or extra deck. In short, my plays are stunted. I can still at least get Sylvia out, so that's one draw for them. Fluffal Dolphin gets another draw. Then Vendor to try and get some advantage here. And unfortunately, it isn't really enough to make a comeback. So I shall then just choose to set my cards. I only have a Coolbite and Sylvia as interaction. And I'm mostly praying, and I don't know what I'm up against still. I'm assuming this isn't too much of a meta deck, but they might have some board breakers. Speaking of, Lightning Storm immediately. I use Sylvia to try and stop this. It's not looking hopeful for me. Then Harpy's Feather Duster. All my, let's be honest, bluffs are now gone. At least get some advantage here. And then they pass. So it seems that they had the board breakers, but none of the engine to make anything of it. So as soon as I draw, they Perulia me again. Now, this of course speaks my mind. I have to kill them now in this turn. And so I'm pretty much going all out, or attempting to. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do so without drawing them some cards. Unfortunately, I discarded Deception there. Okay, then as I draw this, add this Fluffal Sheep, they immediately draw me. Now, this completely turns off Fluffal, and I'm trying to think, is there a way to lethal even with what I have right now? I think Fluffal Sheep might be the answer. Unfortunately, that is also interacted with. And I count my numbers, I didn't have lethal anyway. I was so close, and again, I think I have lost. But I can potentially make some sort of comeback here with the few that I have. So immediately I make Baguska. I'm going to go Baguska, Agent Saber's Yama. I'm also going to make an elf as well. And then we're going to make Soul of Rage. Now, that's my turn, that's my interaction. Of course, Rage is like a few interactions in of itself. Edgemp Siphon Dolphin allows me to make a whale, so that's another interaction. But ultimately, I am relying on the fact that if any card on my field is destroyed, I can bring back Baguska, and that's going to be my saving grace. Especially how they immediately droplet both my monsters. Luckily, Siphon to Whale into popping their Tenpai monster saves me from their wrath. And with that, I pretty much have game. Now, beginning my next match, my hand is rather ideal. There's an Ash Blossom to potentially cover my plays. There's a Foolish Burial Goods, our best starter. We of course have Dear Bellstar for extension, and we actually already have the Wanted spell. So beginning our plays, our opponent immediately reveals that they're on Labyrinth, and they set one of their traps. I search for Dolphin to set up my major plays, and then with Wanted I grab another Dear Bellstar. With Dear Bellstar I set Deception, and so with Deception I'm going to grab Hallowed. And now I can immediately go into Sylvia, since we don't need to go into Morthalago, since we already have a Wanted spell. I then use my Wanted draw, and I managed to draw into Frightful Patchwork. I used the Wanted draw in case I drew into an extension like this before going for my Wings draws. Again, I also choose to link off Chain first to add the Frightful card before my Wings draws. And this increases the chances of drawing more Fluffals with the Toy Vendor draws. I say that and I draw a Royal Penguin's Gardens. That's already a Fluffal Penguin. Brilliant. With this, I can make Whale and pop their back row, and also bring back Penguin with Sheep. I draw a bunch, I send a Toy Vendor. The Toy Vendor will give me Dog. Okay, and now I'm of course gonna go into Bagooska, and then with Bagooska and Whale, I'm probably gonna go into Yama, and then Yama shall search Shavara, and I shall eventually make a Rage after a little bit more extension. Then I shall set Escape the Unchained. I then shall also make a Sprite Elf to protect my Rage and my Sylvia. And with that, I've made my Modest board. And my opponent only has 4 cards in hand. So they start with summoning Arinia, and eventually I shall choose to remove that with Escape the Unchained. Perhaps a misplay, but at least it burns through their bounce. Next, my opponent shall summon Archfiend, and I shall choose to remove the Archfiend with Soul of Rage. And then I'm able to banish one of their back row with Little Knight. Now, since they solve a monster, I can also summon Rage back. And with this, I pretty much have all the tools that I need to win. I can immediately summon Unicorn to force their back row. And I've also saved my Ash Blossom for a big welcome. And with that, we're pretty much only perhaps one Cruel Whale away from attacking for lethal. So I think this game's a good example that Fluffal can play fairly well into some back row decks, since they can trade pretty well. My next game, I believe, is in around Gold 4, and I'm going second. And immediately, my opponent normal summons Rhinoheart, and I have no interaction in my hand. And so they go into Kit Koloss. Kit Koloss gets Kashtira, and then they fuse again after a few mills to make Collider Heart. And after a bit more setup, they just set free back row and pass. Now, this doesn't look too intimidating, but I know, of course, Terrell Elements can play a lot more. So I immediately try to bait out interaction with Deception, Tribute, Chain, and this is met by Heartbeat. Chain, add Patchwork, Burial Goods, Toy Vendor, add Dolphin. And then I summon Penguin to get some bodies on the field. They then choose to flip my Penguin, and that's not an issue. However, they then do fuse into a Kikalos, which I know will mean potentially Rukalos later on. I then use Patchwork. I add Scythe here because I know Scythe can be added back via Rage later on. And I'm going to fuse here, and I'm probably going to make Cruel Well, but I could also flex into Guardian Chimera. My opponent calls Guardian Chimera. So luckily I do have the option of Cruel Well. And as Cruel Well comes down, they immediately try to negate Cruel Well with Sulliek. And so with Cruel Well I chain mostly just to get extension. And so I send Repair to the graveyard. And so Kaleido Heart bounces back Cruel Well. They mill a bunch and they're able to summon Rukalos. This is a very hard board to crack. I use Wanted, I add Diabell Star. I summon Diabell Star, set Deception, but that doesn't really do anything. And then I use Repair, I summon Dolphin, and I try to interact. However, they're able to summon Fairy Tale Snow and flip my Dolphin. And for me, that's the end of the game. Overall, despite losing that one, I do think this was a good example of showing how Fluffal can extend a bit. This next play is in around Gold 3, and one can guess what my opponent's on via their sleeves. And they confirm this by normal summoning Pudika, which I immediately Ash. And I have to say, I have an amazing going second hand with Ash and Scythe, rather ideal. So I immediately Ash Pudika. They summon Syrah, and I elect to Edge Scythe and bring out Cruel Well immediately to out Syrah before they get off any of her effects. And they Maximi to draw one card off this. Honestly, they probably should have saved it for my next turn when I'm about to summon a bunch of cards. They set 3 and pass. So beginning this turn, I already have Polymerization and Chain, so I'm actually going to use Patchwork as potential bait in case they have Ash to cover for my Royal Penguin Gardens. Fortunately, they seem to have nothing. Add with Royal Penguin Gardens, and now I'm going to bring out Sabers to fuse into Frightfur Tiger to pop potentially multiple back row. However, they shall negate with their Veiler in hand. Now, seeing my options, I still want to pop multiple of their back row, and also potentially extend further into lethal. So I choose to then set Fluffal Sheep. Which I then fuse into Guardian Chimera. Now they try to imperm me, but it's to no avail. Guardian Chimera cannot be targeted with Poll in the Grave. And then unfortunately for my opponent, I draw into Frightfur Fusion, although they're already dead with Frightfur Repair. A more successful turn 2 for Fluffal this time. Now, our next games are jumping ahead a bit into Gold 1, and I'm going first. This is a great hand, Ash Blossom and Called By, to cover all my plays. Now I shall of course add Penguin. I should then set Vendor, and discard Vendor. Then going to add Dolphin. I start with Penguin, they do use Veiler, and I meet it with Called By. And now I can just set up with Dolphin. Brilliant. Now here I draw Wanted and Shivara. Now I shall use Wanted, Diabell Star, Sand Gardens. Now with Deception I shall choose to tribute Unchained Soul of Shivara here, since I know I can add it back with Yama. I shall then choose to make Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep, then summon Sylvia. Cross Sheep shall then bring back Penguin. Penguin dog, dog add sheep. Wanted draws for foolish burial goods. I'm going to choose to add sabers here, and I'll need sabers because I haven't been able to fuse into any fright furs, and I shall require multiple fiends on the field to make Yama. Get sabers out onto the field, make Elf, Baguska, into Yama. This heads back to Bar again. Elf for sheep, and I can make Rage. And my setup is complete. My opponent starts with Perimat and adds Sage. So we now know, of course, we're against Blue Eyes. We couldn't have gone throughout this whole run without running into quite a few Blue Eyes, which we did. They no more Sage. They get out Spirit, play Mausoleum. I unchained Soul of Rage here to out their Spirit and also to banish Mausoleum with Little Might. They activate Maiden here, and they haven't used any ball breakers so far, so I think it's safe to Sylvia and negate this. Finally, they discard with Wishes, which is met by my Ash Blossom, which I've saved for this interaction specifically. And at the end here, I actually forget that they're only at 4k life points, and so I bring back Sylvia, and I bring enough creatures on the board to essentially kill them, even if they had 8k life points left. A remarkable showing against Blue Eyes. The final game I shall be showing is my Platinum rank up. Now I shall begin with Royal Penguin Gardens and Penguin. They choose to Fuelos me here, and this of course changes my game plan. I'm going to try and make a very small end board with little to nothing. So I'm going to use Garden to pitch Chain. This shall have Patchwork, and Patchwork shall add me Scythe. And then going to set Sabers, summon Sabers, destroy it with Shavara, bring back Sabers, and I'm going to make Rage. So they get to draw one card, I get to set, and that's around free interaction, kind of. Of course, my opponent goes to battle and uses Evenly Matched, so now I only have Rage and Scythe. And of course they're playing Blue Eyes, who would have guessed? So Maiden White set True Light set Wishes. Now if they're setting Wishes here, of course they probably don't have another copy, and maybe they're low on starters. I choose to Edge Imp Scythe, Cruel Well to pop it before they can activate it. They get to Max Seed to get a few draws off my special summons. They're going to Ash my Penguin draws. They then use Roar to bring out Blue Eyes. This revives Maiden. I'm then going to choose to send that away with Unchained Soul of Rage into Little Knight, and then Little Knight shall banish True Light. They will then try to Wishes target Blue Eyes, and in response I shall chain Little Knight to fizzle their spell. Now they end their turn by just setting their background. I draw Fright Fur Repair. I can potentially summon a Fluffal from the graveyard maybe. I boost my Whale, and then suddenly they activate their trap, which is a surprise, and I can just Little Knight send their Blue Eyes away to fizzle out their trap again. Yeah, a bit of a mistake on their part. And then with my boosted Whale, my opponent just concedes, and it's rather tragic because honestly I do not believe I had lethal on that board, and they were definitely still in the game. Either way, we take those. So what have we learnt here? Well, overall, Fluffamina feels very good to play. The new package picks up on the lacking consistency of a limited one barrel goods. Sylvia feels rather strong, and it can have a decent back and forth with decks like Blue Eyes. However, these are only gold games, of which I was just demonstrating how to play this build. And the Azamina package does unfortunately create a lot of bulk to where we can basically play no hand traps. Anyway, I hope this provided some insight into Fluffamina. Do check out my more general guide if you haven't. Feel free to ask questions in the comments or Discord server. The next Fluffal for you could be in Platinum or in Duel Links or any format where Fluffal is playable. So catch you next time on the Guild of Gurus.